Ladies and gentlemen, we are live, as this is the main event you've all been waiting for. Brought to you by Axonius, the cybersecurity asset management company. It's time!
Hello and welcome to another episode of Virtual Coffee with Ashish, and I am your host Ashish. We're talking about data and we're talking about security data lake. So today's going to be an interesting topic because I think I've had so many questions about it. I can't wait to share some more of this information. But before I do, to bring my guest in, and I must say he has picked a really banger of a song. That's the hint for the song. Hey, welcome, Omer.
Hey,
How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
No, thanks for coming in, man. I think it's always fun to have other security professionals coming in and sharing some of their knowledge, especially in the newer areas of cybersecurity as well. By the way, it's a tradition, so cheers. Thanks for coming in, man.
Cheers, man. It's one of those flavored sodas. You know, when we were in the office, you'd get it for free. You'd have like unlimited. I'd be drinking these things all day. Now I got to pay for it myself.
Oh, so what's your favorite soda? Let's get that out of the way as well.
I got the lime. I got the lime here. Mix it up.
The lime flavor. Oh.
Yeah, LaCroix.
Oh, wait, is that a French soda? Is it?
Yeah, I think so. Or a French name at least. But they used to have it in the office.
Right.
I got hooked when they would just stock the fridges with these things.
Oh, right. Okay. Hey, awesome. Hey, good morning. Vineet's coming in as well. So, we've got a few more people coming in. So, for people who may not know who Omer is, can you tell us a bit about yourself and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. So, Omer Singer. I'm a computer engineer by trade. I live in Santa Monica, California. And I've been in cybersecurity for over 15 years now. So, I got my start when I was at USC. In LA back in 2005. They were kind of early to the cyber game. And as part of the computer engineering program, they let us specialize. And there was a specialty in cybersecurity, which I thought was cool because I figured I could be building things, but it's gonna be a lot more fun to be breaking things. So I gave it a shot, got into cybersecurity then, and I never left. And I've been on both sides. I've been on the defensive side and security operations center roles, been on the offensive side and cyber intelligence gathering roles, which was interesting as well. By the way, fun fact, you had that ad for Axonius earlier, and I actually served with the co-founder and CEO of Axonius. He and I did some interesting things together back in the day. So
Wow, okay.
It's fun how we have kind of a small, it's a pretty small community here in cybersecurity, and we get to know each other over the years. And yeah, for the last 4 years, I've been with Snowflake, initially leading security engineering, building up that team, building the security program on top of Snowflake as a security data lake. And that's the topic that we can chat about today. For the last year or so, I've had this title, head of cybersecurity strategy, that you and I were just talking before we started here about how that's kind of a title that I invented, but I'm having a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome, man. I think we definitely need to like peel off the layers of the strategy title as well. But to point about the security data lake, and this is like the cloud native month in or cloud security podcast this month. So what does cloud native mean for you?
So cloud native is the idea that with more and more of our security happening in the cloud, we have an opportunity to kind of rethink our approach. Cloud native is taking a fresh approach with things that are unique to cloud in order to secure cloud infrastructure. And I'll give you an example. So I mentioned that I started back in 2005. I was doing vulnerability assessments as kind of my first gig in cybersecurity. And I'd come with my laptop. I had Nessus installed on there, and we kind of get the plug into the network, and we'd start scanning, right? And then we'd come out with a list of vulnerabilities, and we'd help the customer to kind of patch those issues. Now, you fast forward today, and there's still a lot of kind of vulnerability scanning going on, even in cloud networks. And if you install Tenable or Nessus on an EC2 server and scan the VPC, that's not cloud native, right? And cloud native is taking an approach like side scanning, where you have some exciting startups in cybersecurity doing side scanning techniques. They're looking at the snapshots that the IaaS provider takes and using those to understand what the vulnerabilities are. Now, that's something you could only do in the cloud. You cannot do that outside of the cloud, but it has all sorts of advantages. That's cloud native to me.
That's an awesome answer. By the way, the company that you're hinting towards there did come in, I think last month to talk about how they do site scanning and everything. Yeah, so those guys came in as well. Awesome. And I think this is probably a good segue into our topic as well then. So to your point about doing security in cloud. And so I'm going to start with the very obvious thing then. What is a secure data lake? Let's just start with that first.
Sure. So security data lake is the idea where you're going to use a general purpose data platform to do security use cases like threat detection, incident response, evaluating security posture. You might call that security analytics. And it's as opposed to using a dedicated separate stack for security. And security data lakes have been around for a while. You had security data lakes back, I would say in like 2013, 2014 on Hadoop, which was exciting, but never lived up to its promise because of some of the shortcomings of Hadoop at the time. But like the idea is that you're taking general purpose big data technology and you're applying it to do whatever you need to do in security.
Yeah, awesome. Just by the way, Elias just came in as well. Hey, Elias, it's Oracle Security Site Scanning. There you go. We were just trying to hint towards Elias. Thanks, man. Shout out to Oracle
subtle,
Security.
Okay.
Yeah. That's it. We were just trying to be subtle, Elias. Thanks, man. Cool. And I think you said something really interesting, because I think when you say using a generic data lake platform, because I think when I talk about data lake to a lot of people, they always think S3 bucket or something else. So we're not talking about S3 bucket over here in AWS.
Well, we might be. I mean, this is where I think we have both a big problem and a big opportunity. As an industry, cybersecurity, we like to think that we're hot shit, that we're really technical, we're very technically savvy. Actually, as an industry, we've fallen way behind a lot of other industries when it comes to data analytics, making use of data. If you look at marketing and finance, they're actually doing a lot more interesting things with BI, ML, predictive analytics, all sorts of really exciting things with data analytics and data science. And in cybersecurity, we really haven't, and it's been holding us back. I think the opportunity is aligning with what the rest of the enterprise is doing in order to get value from data. And so look, if your company, where you're at, is using an S3 based data lake in order to understand, for example, what ads to serve up, or kind of what the financial picture is going to look like for next year, and the cybersecurity, you as in cybersecurity want to align to that, then do it. Like basically join the company where it's doing its data analytics. Now, for a Snowflake customer, or for a security team that works at a company that's a Snowflake customer, that might be getting on Snowflake. If you work at a company where BigQuery is the central data platform, then get on BigQuery. It's really the important thing is cybersecurity aligning to the rest of the company, where they're doing interesting things with data. And just last thing on S3, like this is not about archiving, right? That's a big misconception where people thinking about security data lake as a place to just archive a bunch of data, dump it, and hey, if I have an incident, I'll figure out a way to restore it. Like that's really leaving a lot of value on the table and probably introducing a lot of risk. There's really a lot of very interesting analytics that you can be doing as a security team.
Actually, that is true because a lot of the S3 features just store and archive, so you can save cost on it
That's
as
right.
well.
Yeah,
All
yeah,
right.
yeah. But
Okay. So that's a
actually,
good point.
you know, yeah, yeah.
So
Because
to
we
your
want to
point
get
about
value from
the,
the data, right? Not just solve
that's
the
right.
storage problem. We need to have an analytics solution.
Yeah, and I think to your point, now since you mentioned it like that, because S3 bucket is just literally like a storage. It's like, yeah, I mean, there's nothing running on top of it. It just, this is your data. Just do whatever you want with it, but you have to kind of add that layer on top. I think it's not just a matter of, hey, I've stored everything and it'll help me get all the information that I need to. Because I think you need to run some kind of I think Athena or something on top of it. Anyway, I'm going in the wrong direction, but I think where I was going to go with this was it's really interesting you mentioned that about S3 bucket. Then, so are we using the data to perform analytics? Are we behind in the times? But I thought themes of the world are maybe if we talk about what theme is first, and I thought themes of
Yeah,
the world
well,
were trying to solve that problem.
let's define. Yeah, let's define that because I know we kind of even frame this topic as like, what is the future of SIEM given the security data lake, right? And I think SIEM as a category, it's really going to be challenged because if you think about, okay, secure SIEM, it's security information and event management. The idea that I have a lot of alerts coming from all sorts of different sensors. I also have a lot of raw data, forensic data that's coming off of my endpoints that my EDR is generating. My IaaS environment is also recording so many facts about things that are changing, things that are happening, connections being established. And as a security team, I need to kind of have a place where I can go and either use that to have accurate threat detections or be in a position to investigate something, respond to an incident, and mitigate the threat before some serious damage is done, right? And generally, for most companies, that's the SIEM, right? That's kind of like the nerve center of the SOC. That's where all the data is going. That's where the alerts are ultimately coming from. The problem is that the SIEMs of today are built on technology that's just not scaling. And there's so much security data out there now that it's a full-time job just being able to have all this data in one place where you can ask questions of that data. It's just become really hard. And so when you talk to people who actually use a SIEM, you hear, well, first of all, it might be the biggest line item in the security budget, so a ton of spend. And then in terms of the visibility, we're saying, hey, it's the place where all our data goes. Then in actuality, it's getting maybe a third of the data, some cases a quarter of the data, and much of the data can't be pulled into the SIEM because these solutions are just so expensive on what they can collect and how long they can keep it. And that's putting us in a really bad place from an analytics perspective, because table stakes for good analytics is having all your data in one place where you can actually use it. And as long as the SIEM is not able to support that, it's not going to be successful. And that's why I think this is a really important topic to be talking about, and to kind of get informed on some of the exciting changes that are happening in the space.
Oh, so you're saying that I kind of like what you mentioned there because the term that I think I've read that in one of your blogs, the whole vertically integrated SIEM, which is not going to work. So I think when you say vertical integration, because everyone's trying to come into that one point, would that be different in a security data lake? Would that not be vertical at that point?
It would. Like, if you look at the SIEM solutions, and we can call out who some of the big SIEM players are. Splunk's the biggest SIEM player by far in terms of market share.
Yeah.
You have Elastic having their own SIEM. You have Sumo Logic having their own SIEM. What all those have in common, all those technologies have in common, is that they are log management solutions. They
Yeah.
are search engines, and they're really expensive. And what they're meant to solve is mainly kind of these DevOps use cases where you need to very quickly be able to ask questions of the data, observability, log management type of use cases, and they do a good job of that. But if we need to get full visibility on all the data and really be able to ask questions across petabytes of data going back a year or more, that's a big data challenge. And big data is a hard problem. And a company that tries to solve both the big data analytics problem and the security specific challenges around all the integrations, around automatically identifying TTPs across all the different parts of the infrastructure, and having an easy interface for analysts to use, like, it's just too much. And when you try to do too much, you end up not doing anything particularly well. And so the model that we see emerging is the data problem you put on the data stack, and that gets solved there. And you have this new category of tools coming out called XDR, for extended detection and response. And what the open XDR players are saying is, look, you put the data wherever you want to put the data. Have the data in a place where you can cost effectively centralize it, aggregate it, and we're going to be laser focused on pulling the data in, normalizing it, enriching it, using it to do accurate threat detection, and supporting efficient incident response. And that kind of separation of duties, that kind of best of breed, everybody focus on what they do best, that's the model that is not vertically integrated, ends up being much more effective, and that we see our customers moving towards.
That's awesome, and I think we've definitely touched on an interesting topic because a few people have kind of have got a questions. I want to switch over to that for a second.
Sure.
Just want to quickly acknowledge hey Vineet, hey MS, hi Elias, thanks for recommending the thing. Hi Abdul Majid as well, welcome. So I've got a question from MS over here. Maybe it's just me, but I'm curious to know, why do we need another data lake for security? Why not security folks build their own AI ML based solutions related to security scans, the entire?
So it's a great question. Sorry. I see what you're saying, MS, and this is, you hit on it exactly. Thank you for calling this out. I'm not proposing that security has a separate data lake, a separate data stack. In fact, what I'm saying is security join the rest of the company in the data stack that is serving all the other departments. We have this really kind of silly situation where the entire enterprise is running on some data platform, and security has its separate data stack. And then it's really struggling to collect the data and to have interesting insights and to be data driven. Security is really struggling with that. And so we should not try to build a stack. I mean, that's exactly what we're trying to say here. And the security data lake kind of nomenclature is not ideal. I kind of struggle with that as well. And if anybody has a better suggestion for what we should call this architecture, I'm listening, and it's actually relevant because we are trying to kind of at Snowflake have more content on this, and we kind of just aligned to the terminology that was out there so people would kind of know what the hell we're talking about when we say use your standard general purpose data platform for security use cases as well as everything else. But yeah, it's definitely not separate. And in fact, if cybersecurity teams were more kind of with it when it comes to big data, I don't think we would need one, right? You don't have like finance data lake, marketing data lake. It's like, no, it's just a data platform, whether it's a data lake, data warehouse, doesn't matter. Just call it data platform. Like they just use the central one. And I think over time, yeah, maybe we'll just call it security analytics, and everybody will know what we're talking about.
Actually, yeah, because I would say, because I think to your point, and both Emerson's point, I think you answered the question because he just came back saying, awesome, thanks for clarifying it. That's what I was thinking as well. Because to your point, it does make sense from the perspective that you don't want to add on to the existing thing. It's just more reuse what your company is already doing with data analytics. Just tap into that because they're already everywhere in your organization.
Yeah, and it's hard to get to a single source of truth. Like, let's not underestimate the challenge there. That's a really important thing to do, and it's what enables then everything else. And if you think about your security program, you probably today you have some forensic data out with the EDR vendor, you have some SaaS logs out with the SaaS vendor, you have maybe a multi-cloud environment, and each cloud has its own logs, and then you have maybe some corporate data going to the SIEM. Look at all those silos. How are you supposed to automate detection across that? Like, are analysts supposed to be piecing that together in their heads? Like, of course, that's not going to work. And then each one has its own retention period. And now you have some of the data for some of the time. Anyways, I think this is really an important job, especially for anybody tasked with securing a cloud-centric infrastructure where there's just so much data, to really treat this as a big data problem, align to the big data solution that the company selected, and then focus on how do you use all that data to do a good job everywhere else.
Awesome answer, man. I got a question from Wasim as well. Omer, do you see strategies such as SOAR and Playbook naturally bolting onto security data like easily? It's really where everyone is spending their time to build automation.
Yeah, I do. I think SOAR is another one of these categories where everybody was super excited about SOAR, a huge promise. And I think the results have been a little bit underwhelming. I don't know, like maybe Wasim, you guys have done an exceptional job with your SOAR, but many security teams I talk to, they say they bought a SOAR solution. They were really getting into it. You ask them, what have you automated with SOAR? And they'll tell you our phishing investigations fully automated with SOAR. And that's it. And it's like, okay, well, then there's probably more that we could be doing. And I think the reason why we haven't seen SOAR really deliver is because there's so much noise in the detection upstream from the SOAR, which automates kind of what do you do afterwards, right? There's so much noise in the detection, so many false positives, that if you try to hook up your detections to your automation, it just, these like robots will be going crazy, right? Because they're being sent everywhere and nothing would be kind of done as it was supposed to be done. What you need high fidelity detections so that you can actually have automation. You could take the human out of the loop. Today, most security teams, they have to have people reviewing the detections before anything can happen downstream. And once you got the person in there, that's it. You're done with automation. It's just not going to happen. So I think once we have a single source of truth in the security data lake, you have all the data, you have an analytics engine where you can use context, you can use that complete picture to finally have accurate detections without all the false positives, then you can have SOAR actually start automating a lot more and get a lot more value from that. It just, there are these things that need to be done first, but absolutely, this all is kind of going in the same direction of automation.
Oh, that's a great answer, because I think Wasim has another one, which is MS for what it's worth. I've been working in a large bank who has been building the enterprise data lake. They hired a bunch of PhD data scientists 4 years on. They're still building, and the biggest challenge is still how to aggregate the data at scale and correlate it sensibly. So they, just to comment to what MS was saying, and Wasim also agrees that SOAR was snake oiled. I think all of us are still waiting for the promised land to be seen for SOAR. Thanks for the comment as well, Wasim and MS. But this is really good. This is really awesome content as well, man. I think I'm glad we clarified the fact that, hey, we're not trying to build our own security data lake. We're just trying to bolt onto the existing one. It sounds like it needs to be in organizations that are already doing some kind of data analytics project. So anyone who's listening to this probably can go, hey, my company's already doing security data analytics. Sorry, they're already doing data analytics. How do I tap into that to get some security information? Would that be the right way to kind of explain what security data lake is as well?
Well, I think one of the nice things is that this movement, and I really do think that this is a movement of cybersecurity joining the rest of the company in doing analytics. But this movement has been gaining steam, and vendors have been recognizing it. And we're seeing more and more vendors in the detection and response space, including traditional SIEM vendors, saying, we're going to embrace this architecture. And you know what? We're not going to require you as the customer to send us a separate kind of slice of the data. We're going to hold it. And if you want this data, you got to come to us. You're seeing more and more vendors saying, we're going to come to you, to where the data is. And it's coming from lots of different directions. You know, we had early partnerships with XDR players like Hunter's AI. Panther Labs has this approach. Securonics, the highest scoring SIEM vendor in the Gartner MQ, has now an open bring your own data lake architecture. Exabeam announced that they're doing it. So I think you don't need to start from scratch. You don't need to depend on data scientists just to get started. I think over time, you can make use of the fact that you have all this data in a standard general purpose data platform that supports data science, to then hire data scientists or partner with existing data scientists in your company and do more with that. But there's a lot of capabilities backed by vendors that support this architecture. And you can see some great progress, which is working with an open vendor that supports this architecture. The vendors that remain committed to that vertical integration, those are the ones I think that are going to continue to hold security teams back. And I think they're on an evolutionary dead end, because if you're trying to do both big data and security analytics, as well as companies that focus on one or the other, you're just not going to be able to keep up.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting what you mentioned about data analytics and data scientists as well, because I feel like I don't know that many companies are actually, like, it seems like there's a movement happening to what you just said. Are there a lot of companies that have already adopted this? I think the only company that I know of is Netflix, because I think when I was talking to them 2-3 years ago, they were hiring for data analytics, and I was like, why are you hiring a data analytics person for security at that point? That was me being surprised at 3 years ago. But now it seems like it's the norm to have, if you have a lot of data to work with, you definitely need some data analytics people in your team. So what's driving the adoption, you reckon? Because is it more the fact that people are starting to realize SIEM sucks? Did I say that loud?
Yeah, well, definitely companies are doing it. It's not just Netflix anymore. Last year in Snowflake's award ceremony, we have like the Oscars of Snowflake once a year. And for the
Right.
data science category, the Comcast security analytics team took home the award. And they're doing a great job over there. And it doesn't all have to be AI, really kind of scary, fancy stuff. Some of this data analytics is just BI, just having self-service reports where people outside of the security org can, for the first time, have direct access to some of the data, the insights, the metrics. Where, for example, HR might have a role to play in your security program because they need to make sure that terminated employees get decommissioned quickly, right? They don't do the decommissioning themselves, but they need to start the process. In many companies, that process doesn't happen flawlessly. And sometimes you have employees and they still have access to their to different systems for days or weeks after their termination. That's scary, right? So if you can reflect to the HR vice president how their organization is doing in terms of opening tickets on a timely basis, they're going to probably do a better job because they have that visibility, and they know others have that visibility. Maybe the CFO, maybe the CIO, maybe the CEO has visibility in their Tableau or Looker dashboards, and so they're going to do what it takes to do better there. That's analytics. Like, if you just have that, that works. And people joining security sometimes ask me, like, what is the best skill I should learn to get into cybersecurity? And you tell them, learn SQL. Learn SQL because it's in such short supply today within cybersecurity, and it's such an enabler that I think it's a great skill to have. So I think that's accelerating. And then again, just companies like Panther Labs that are saying, like, you don't need to build this yourself. We have the integrations that are going to turn your Snowflake into a SIEM. The fact that they have that off the shelf available, ready to go, makes this accessible to many more security teams, including teams that they see themselves as engineers, right? They know Python, they want to build, and so having this kind of very scalable, kind of limitless platform that has all the data and you can kind of crunch it as much as you want, they have a lot of fun with it, and so they're embracing it.
That's good to hear. I want another question from Wasim here as well. Omer, do you find a good place to start is consuming cloud-native telemetry first, such cloud sources like CloudTrail, IAM, then tackling on-premise next, syslog, SHA, or do you pull as much as you can at once? What are your thoughts on getting immediate value?
Now, that's such an important question because a lot of times people are approaching a security data lake project, and this is kind of what I do. I work with teams that are kind of starting out these projects. So they'll start from the sources. What do I bring in? And I think this is maybe a relic of the SIEM kind of poisoning our minds a little bit and making this all about log management. Like, guys, we're not here to manage logs. We're not here to check a compliance box. We're trying to do better detection and response, right? At the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do.
That's right.
And hey, if we can be proactive and lock down these environments, that's great too. And so start with that. Start with what are the business outcomes that you're looking to achieve rather than the data sources. So, awesome. I think the question is, what are your crown jewels? Who are the threat actors that are going to be going after your crown jewels? And then work backwards from there. And what you may find, and this goes back to kind of cloud native, what you may find is a focus on proactive hardening might be more rewarding than better threat detection. Maybe you start off by not having any logs ingested, but you start snapshotting your configuration records in AWS, and you start checking to see, hey, are my security groups locked down the way they're supposed to be, or not? Right? Maybe that's the most valuable thing. It's going to be about the business outcomes and being able to measure them, define them. Right? Treat this as an engineering project that you design, and afterwards you'll get to, okay, well, if this is what I want to do, what are the data sets that I need? Where are they found today? How do I go and collect them? And then get to collecting them. And maybe they'll be in the cloud. Maybe they'll be on-prem. Maybe they'll be out in SaaS. But work backwards from the business outcomes that you're trying to achieve.
Interesting. So crown jewels in areas where their data analytics is already taking place, and then walk backwards from there.
Crown jewels, wherever it is, maybe what you're trying to secure is a physical warehouse. I work with a customer called Prologis. They're the largest operator of physical warehouses in the country, and they collect all sorts of data to their Snowflake, including badge data, like who's badging into the physical warehouses, right? Because maybe that's what they want to make sure, that if somebody's badging in, they're really kind of around, or if they're on vacation in Hawaii, like why did they just badge in, right? Maybe somebody stole their identity or stole their badge or whatever. So it's not even necessarily about where your data is. It's using the data to protect your crown jewels, whatever they may be.
Also, and to take another leaf from what Wasim was asking, so the immediate value question, so our value proposition hasn't really changed. It's just how, or not, I don't want to use the word data sources again, but so what are we using to display, hey, this is how we're giving value to the organization as a security? That hasn't changed. That still remains the same. It's just that we're trying to better ourselves by not using SIEM as a way to do detection and response, but instead we already have these data lakes around in the company. How do we kind of tap into some of those to kind of find out like what could be a source of truth? Would that be right?
Yeah, and I think the reason maybe why we're, as an industry, we're so focused on what data sets do we bring in is because with SIEM, that was so hard. It was so hard to bring in the data, and it was like, oh, this is too much data. I'm gonna spend a bunch of time shaving it down, and I'll bring my Windows events, but if it's event, 424 and not 420, I don't want to bring that one in. It's too noisy, and then we're just in these log sources. It's like, let's assume that you have all the data. Let's just start with that assumption. Let's say you have all the data for as long as you want, and it's in a place where you could join it with the business data, you could join it with threat intelligence, you really have you have the full picture, cybersecurity 360. Now let's start asking the hard questions of, what do we care about as a security team? Like, what do we care about? What are we worried about? And use that to drive your strategy.
That's awesome. I've got a few questions that came in for folks who could not make it, but they basically dropped in a few questions to me, so I'm going to go through them as well. But by the way, Wasim loves the idea of bringing your own telemetry approach. He loves it. I think because I think telemetry and the whole standard was something that we touched on last week as well, where each application provider has their own standard of writing a log as well, and you're trying to figure out, hey, what does this really mean? And then in your SIEM, there is that whole another language at that point. What do I use over here to try and make some sense of all these sources coming in? So I appreciate that. So for the questions that came in from the community, for the folks who could not make it to the live, we're part of Cloud Security Forum, and the first question they asked was, there are a layer of knobs to turn ownership of database objects, secure view, external encryption, even bring your own key, BYOK. How would you prioritize them based on trading off usability and effectiveness in terms of reduction of attack surface, like long-term maintenance cost, obviously?
Yeah, that sounds like a question that's coming from somebody that's responsible for securing a Snowflake environment, and I'm glad that he's thinking about that because it is something that you don't want to just kind of trust that everything's working as it's supposed to be working. As a security team, yes, think about cloud infrastructure security, but now also start thinking about data security. I mean, definitely that's important. This is where I would say, as a security team that's aligning to the data platform the rest of the company is using, like, work with the people that are managing that data platform, and work with all the different advisors. And you mentioned bring your own key. That's a specific Snowflake feature, so I'm assuming they're a Snowflake customer. We have an entire team of security field CTOs. Their expertise is data security. How do you lock down this environment? I think it's important, right? You have business data, maybe you have security data going in there. You want to make sure it's locked down. There's a lot of configurations that you can put in to harden it, like restricting which IP addresses can connect, for example. And then there are additional solutions that are focused on data security that check to see, for example, do you have a user that's all of a sudden pulling down 1,000 records with social security numbers in them? Well, maybe that's an insider threat, right? So you get into classification, you get into monitoring. That's an entire area. But yeah, I think we should focus on how do we as security teams use that data platform to have a more effective security program.
Oh, right. Okay. And to your point, the because there are two parts to this as well. One is the security data lake itself. You're trying to grab information from the data lake for what you think is the security, I guess, for lack of a better word, pulse, I guess. How do you get my pulse of security from that particular data source? But then there's the other side of how do I secure this thing as well? Because I want the right people to have access to this data, because potentially some of that could be sensitive as well. Like there could be PII in there and a lot of things, other things in there as well. So there's two sides to this as well.
Yeah, and we see attackers. They're running a business. They're always following kind of where the money is, and the more that data is the new oil, the more that companies have their most sensitive IP, a lot of value in these data platforms, the more attackers are going to go after it. So yeah, beat them to it. I think maybe an added side benefit of having the security program run on the central data platform is that security becomes more familiar with that data platform, right? Because they're using it as one of their tools now. So now it's not some strange thing off to the side. They have a better sense of it. They start feeling like, okay, I understand what RBAC means in a data platform. Well, let me ask some questions about what is our RBAC policy, right, for the system.
Right. And thanks for clarifying that as well, because I think it's definitely worthwhile separating those two things out, because one is just how do you do it internally, but then the other part is also how do you mitigate the threat to the platform itself. The other question that came from that was S3. So S3 bucket has a lot of different tiering options. It's a very Snowflake specific question again, but as S3 has a lot of different tiering options, would Snowflake consider going into this direction? A data lake may be flat, but we have a priority. They have a lot of, I guess they consume a lot of high priority information, like a lot of sensitive information. So they obviously want to go down that path.
I see what they're saying. I mean, yeah, stay tuned. We're always looking for ways to make our storage even more cost effective. Last quarter, we released some compression improvements behind the scenes that improved by 30% compression. So all of a sudden, storage costs drop up to 30%. Very significant for some customers. And if there's ways to use kind of S3 behind the scenes kind of different options to achieve further savings, I think it's something that we'll be looking at. But the first thing is to tap into the cost effectiveness of cloud native storage, right? The reality is for most SIEMs out there today, you send data there, they're actually loading it into some server, which is going to be very expensive storage and not using the cloud native storage. In Snowflake, if you're running Snowflake on AWS, it is S3 under the hood. And that's how we can charge $23 a terabyte a month for storage. And we charge for compressed data. So it's actually going to be up to 10x compression on machine data. You might be looking at 10 terabytes for $23 a month. That's why I can confidently say the limitations are removed. You're like, the technology is out there now to have all your data in one place for as long as you need. Now let's talk about what you can do with it.
Awesome. And the next question from the forum was also, is there a security data warehouse too, or is it just security data lake? Or what is the difference between a data lake and data warehouse?
We can get into that. I honestly had no idea what a data warehouse was before I joined Snowflake, which just goes to show how much in cybersecurity we don't know enough about this area. They come from different places. The data warehouse was very structured. It was columnar, and you needed to have all the data very well structured, which is, by the way, why security couldn't use it, because we have all these different data sources. They have all these different shapes and sizes, and the formats are always changing. Some sources will call it source IP. Some sources will call it SRC_IP. It's a mess, right? A lot of it is JSON. And data warehouses couldn't hold that semi-structured data. Then you had data lakes, which were all about the semi-structured data, but they had their own problems in terms of actually kind of working with the data, having governance on the data. What we're seeing now, though, is that all the data platforms are really kind of meeting in the middle. And they're taking the best of all the different cloud warehouse stuff, the best of the data lake stuff, and they're having it in this kind of data platform. And so Snowflake doesn't call itself a data warehouse anymore. You have other players in the space coming from the data lake side, and now they're adding data warehouse capabilities. I wouldn't get into those semantics. I think the point is you want to be using cloud data platform. The important thing is that the storage is very cheap and limitless, and that when you need to ask tough questions, you have a lot of compute to throw at the problem. Like, those are the things that a modern cloud data platform is going to give you.
Awesome. Thanks for that. And I've got a few questions that came from David Matosek. That was left on LinkedIn yesterday. So how is a security data lake different from a SIEM? I think we should have answered that earlier, but I think it's worthwhile calling out. If for someone who's listening to this and going, how SIEM gives me the same information, security data lake would give me the same information as well, but seems like I would need like a data lake platform, or I guess, am I creating a data lake from scratch? Or do I have to buy a vendor to do this?
Yeah.
But it sounds like I already have a vendor with SIEM. I hope I explained that right.
Yeah, I wouldn't get too hung up on these categorizations, because like a lot of this is just analysts and vendors making stuff up to have something to sell you. I think the important thing is you need to have a place where you could put all your security data and be able to analyze it. And a SIEM is a certain architecture. It's an architecture that is traditionally vertically integrated, came from the log management kind of requirements. So your SIEM will typically have collectors, storage, analytics, and some investigation interface. Those are usually kind of that's what a SIEM is. What the security data lake is saying, that storage and / compute engine, let's rip that out. Let's take everything that's left and bolt that onto the data platform that the company is using. That's the security data lake approach. So it's a different architecture. These aren't solutions as much as they are architectures. And then you go and look, you have a SIEM like Securonics saying that they support bring your own Snowflake. Well, they're still a SIEM, but they're not a SIEM in the traditional sense, because what they're saying is they're going to come to wherever your data is stored. They're going to accommodate that. They're going to support that kind of direction where you're going of joining the rest of the company on a central data platform. And so I'm considering that a security data lake architecture. That's the important thing to differentiate.
I'm smiling because I remember a lot of companies that I've consulted for, there always was a regular theme with no matter what application you architect, all logs should go into SIEM. That's almost like a Hitler rule of, like a dictator kind of a thing. It's like all logs should go into SIEM. What happens after that, do not care, but push them into SIEM. But I'm starting to see even more the value that a security data lake would bring in, because in an organization, you're not asking people to, hey, I want all your logs, send it over here. You already have the logs. You keep it where you keep it, but it's in your data lake. I'm just tapping into that existing platform to understand, how do I make some sense of this so I can detect threats and respond to it on a timely basis. So I love that approach, because you're almost removing that friction of, hey, I want to have all the logs into this amazing platform, but no, you already have the platform. So I love it.
Exactly.
Sorry.
We have a question here from Andre.
Yeah, we have a question, Andre. Sorry, I'm just going to quickly finish those two and come to Andre's question. I've got two more questions. Sorry. The other one was, how do you measure the value of a security data lake? How do you measure the value a security data lake provides to a customer versus a business executive?
Yeah, I think measuring value is important. How do you go about doing it? It goes back to, what is your security program all about? Well, first thing is, can you collect all the data? I think if you can show that before you were trying to juggle multiple data silos, and you had some of the data going to the SIEM, some of the data going to some S3 bucket, some of the data staying out with the EDR vendor, and you saying like, look, now I know as an incident responder, for example, I know that if I go to this data platform, I'm going to find my logs there, even if it happened 9 months ago on some server somewhere in some cloud. I go to the data platform, and that single source of truth, it's going to be there. Well, I think that's valuable, right? I think if you can also start measuring key risk indicators and show that they're trending in a good direction, that's one. And I'll give you an example. We consider when I was in the security engineering team at Snowflake, we considered visibility to be really important for us, because hey, if we don't have visibility, everything else that we're doing downstream for that, it's going to be questionable, right?
That's
and
right.
So we started tracking that. We took our inventory. Here are all the servers that we have. We had that in one table in the database, and then we had another table with all of the CloudTrail logs or whatever, agent logs, whatever it is, and we started comparing inventory to logs. And if we see a system in inventory that we don't see in the logs, that's a visibility gap. And if we boil it down to one number, just a percentage, that's what we can then report and show that to all the different stakeholders and say, by the end of the quarter, can we take this from a 70% to an 80%? And if we do, then great, that's value. And if you don't, that's still value, because then at least you know that for whatever reason, our DevOps team doesn't have the tools or the manpower or whatever they need to successfully achieve the visibility targets that we're going after. So that kind of quantified approach, that measured approach, is something that you'll see a data platform really supporting, because that's that kind of data warehouse BI background really shining through. It's all about measuring things and reporting it. But now that extends to logs and other data sources as well.
And what about governance then? So his final question was, how do you govern a data lake with different classification of data in one place? Because imagine everyone has PII, non-PII. How does governance work in that space then?
Yeah, I think this is one of the challenges with an S3 data lake, is that governance becomes really, really hard. And it's something that at Snowflake, we spend a lot of time on governance. And there are different policies that you can apply. Obviously, we're not going to go into them here, but yeah, there are techniques that are out there, and there are tools too that go in and they do classification, and then they track to see what are kind of analysts querying for. Are they querying for a bunch of records that we understand have social security numbers, PII, or financial records, etc., and then have that as an input to the security team as, hey, investigate that. I think increasingly we will see sources like that driving what the security operation is doing, rather than just like malware on a laptop. Like actually some analyst that seems to be really keen on some private data, like that's also something that security should investigate.
Awesome. Thanks for answering those questions, and thanks for sending them through David Matusek as well as the Cloud Security Forum.
Yeah.
And thank you for your patience as well, Andres. So Andres' question is AWS, GCP, or Azure to create a secure data lake. What do you prefer?
Well, I got to say that I'm biased as a kind of, I'm at Snowflake, and Snowflake runs in all three. So I would say, if you're using Snowflake, it really doesn't matter which three. And again, aligned to what the rest of the company is doing. I think security needs a partnership with the data organization. So Andre, if the rest of kind of the data strategy where you work is to be on Azure, build your security data lake on Azure. But if the company is going all in on AWS as the place where the rest of the data lives, well, join them there. Like this is really a partnership now, and you're going to really love not having to worry so much about kind of all the underlying stuff, just knowing that you have the data there, and now do interesting things with it.
Awesome. If you have a follow-up question, feel free to ask a follow-up question as well, Andre. Yeah. Abdul Majid asked a question as well. Omer Singer, I was reading one of your blogs about Panther and Snowflake integration. What would you advise immediately for a company who wants to automate their workload ASAP with all major features of a traditional SIEM to start with? I think the advice is on what's required first, I guess. How do you start?
I mean, reach out to these vendors. They're experts at this. This is where, when I started this journey at Snowflake back in 2018, we didn't have vendors supporting this. So it was a bunch of like open source. I hired a bunch of Python developers, and we were just building tooling ourselves, which is hard. And you're building tooling rather than actually doing the detection and response work, right? So I'd say now take advantage of the fact that you have experts at Panther Labs. You also have experts at additional solutions. If you require all the features of a traditional SIEM, we're starting to see traditional SIEM vendors embracing this architecture as well, right? And this is where you have, for example, Securonics now supporting this architecture as well. They're really coming at it with a different approach. If you value detection as code, if you want tests for your detections, CI/CD integration, Panther has built a phenomenal solution that I wish we had when we got started, and we didn't have to build all that custom tooling ourselves. But I'll share that we're actually in the process of fixing that and actually bringing Panther into the security engineering team at Snowflake. So we're excited to use their tooling, and they have some great customers out there. If you check out their website, Figma, for example, is a team that's using it and recorded a webinar talking about their experience. So I would check that stuff out and reach out to them.
Awesome. All right, thank you. And toward I think Amos has a question before. I think this is a good one. Are we looking into new roles in the future as data security engineers or analysts who understand how data lakes work and managing security of data lakes? A security layer on top of a data lake architecture, monitoring, scanning. So are we opening up? I think I would say yes, but I'm curious to hear your opinion.
I think so. I mean, if you look at data security as an ecosystem, so many new solutions out there doing data security. Just like you have application security, yeah, I think data security is going to be a thing. And again, I think learning SQL is probably the best investment that anybody in cybersecurity can do today. And yeah, I mean, I never thought about it as kind of its own role, but I think as more and more companies are being data driven and going all in on a data first strategy, yeah, it's going to be a great role. And then also in the service of the security program, right? Because if you understand cybersecurity, you understand CIA, right? Confidentiality, integrity, and assurance, availability. If you understand attacker TTPs, and then you also understand data engineering, data science, BI, and now you combine those two. I mean, wow, it's you're going to be a superstar for sure.
Like a unicorn for sure at that point. I
That's a
think,
unicorn. That's right.
yeah,
That's right.
I
I don't
think,
think you could
but
hire somebody like that today with as much budget as you wanted. I don't think you can hire somebody like that today.
yeah, it
Not a
would
bad
take
set of
some
skills.
really, yeah, it would be a really unique skill set as well. But I guess this is probably a final question from my side then. So if someone wants to start learning about this, where should one start? Like, sounds like if I'm a security person listening to this, I think I've heard of data analytics. I think I know what I want. So how am I upskilling myself to be able to do a security data lake? What's that requirement there?
So, I mean, if you want to join now, the nice thing is you're getting in at the ground floor. You're joining at the really kind of the early days of a movement that I think is going to transform cybersecurity. So definitely do it. You know, you can add me on LinkedIn. I try to kind of post things about this that I'm seeing successful at different customers that are doing this. Using the hashtag security data lake. So hashtag security data lake on LinkedIn. What you're going to find is if you search for that on LinkedIn, you're going to find testimonials. You're going to find customers now starting to talk about this. And just at Black Hat, for example, just this week, right? We had Black Hat. We had the head of security, Pallavi at Netgear, and she talks about how she moved and her team moved from a traditional SIM approach to a security data lake, and why and how they did it. And she has guidance and advice for anybody doing it as well. And it's so awesome that now we're still in very early days in this movement, but we have now enough security teams doing it that you're going to see leaders talking about it. So watch Pallavi's video. Watch you have Julie from Guild Education. She talks about her team's journey moving from a traditional SIM to running Panther on Snowflake. So Pallavi used Hunters on Snowflake, and Julie from Guild Education, she used Panther on Snowflake. But they talk about it, and you're going to learn a lot hearing what they went through, and then talk to your data engineers or whoever's running kind of the data center of excellence in your company. Probably there's somebody right doing that. Talk to them and come to them with some of the challenges, like, hey, I was really hoping to do better insider threat detection next year. Like, what do you think about like approaching that together, and work with them in a partnership and bring your expertise and they'll bring their expertise. And I think then you'll find that you're able to create some early successes and build on those.
Awesome. Right. So that's the sort of technical questions that I had. I've got some fun questions as well. Just not too many, just three of them. But I think this is really interesting, and I feel like I can keep going on the data lake pieces. But for the moment, let's check with the three questions of security. Oh, no, security, fun questions. First one, what do you spend most time on when you're not working on security data lake?
I'm not working on security data lake. Well, I have a 3-year-old and she takes up a lot of my time. So playgrounds, pushing her on the swing, that kind of thing. And then I have a nice little setup in kind of it's not really a backyard, more like a porch here, where I have some workout equipment. Where if being stuck at home, work from home, pandemics, closures, who knows what we're going into. So try to kind of also exercise a little bit outside then.
Awesome.
Good use of time. Yeah.
That's a great. That's definitely a positive use of their time as well. Second question: what is something that you're proud of but is not on your social media?
Proud of but not on social media. Well, I think it's the Security Operations Center that I ran at my previous role. I was at an MSSP, and we need to do 24/7 security. And it's hard. You do the graveyard shift on that. It's hard to stay focused and do this job 24/7. And what we did is we took a chance on some people that really were interested in cybersecurity but had no background. Nobody was taking their resumes, and we took a chance on them, and we built a training program internally. And I see now how they're advancing, and like by now they're not doing the graveyard shift anymore because everybody wants to get out of that. But they're doing these great roles at great security teams, and I'm really proud of giving those individuals their start. And it's so much fun to see where they're advancing their security careers now.
Wow. Yeah, I think you've laid the seed for a great future for a lot of people. That's pretty awesome, man. So last question: what's your favorite cuisine or restaurant that you can share?
Cuisine or restaurant? I think Italian, man. I think you can't go wrong with Italian, right? You got pizza for during the week. You want to go to fancy dinner, you take the missus out to some fancy Italian restaurant. She's happy. So yeah, I got to give credit to the Italian cuisine.
Awesome. That's awesome, man. So that was the question that I had. But where can people find you? I think you mentioned LinkedIn earlier. So is LinkedIn the best place to hang out and connect with you for people who have more questions about this?
Yeah, best place is LinkedIn. Omer Singer, Omer with an E, Singer. Add me on LinkedIn and reach out. And I really feel like this is a movement. So if you're a part of this movement, if you're getting started at your company to taking a more data-driven approach to your security program, reach out. Let's set a Zoom. Let's catch up and help each other out as we try to do better security with better data.
Yeah, awesome. And I want to quickly give a good shout out to all the interesting questions that came in as well from MS, Abdul Majid, Andres, and Wasim as well. I think I've mentioned everyone because that discussion was definitely really interesting questions coming in as well. So thank you everyone who kind of participated as well. For everyone else, I think I'm talking to we'll talk next weekend. I've got someone from Atlassian coming in talking about how they're using observability platforms. So it's going to be a really interesting conversation over there as well. That's the other part of like using cloud native. But thank you, Omer, for coming in. I really appreciate your time, man. So I'll probably see everyone next time. But thanks so much, man. I think we need to bring you again so we can at least finish all the other questions that I had. Awesome, man. Thanks, everyone. And I'll see you all together next week. Bye.